In the cave, archaeologists have discovered a human skull in the rock that can change our history, but an unpleasant situation happened to the explorer. What were the children of the ancient Incas drugged with during the sacrifice, and why the books of Anglo-Saxon England are so valuable? A ship that could surprise. About these finds and more, see in this video. Hi friend, you are on the KirTop channel. Bronze plate in the shape of a hand. Let's start with a find, discovered in warm Spain. Archaeologists have begun excavations of the hill where the walls of the medieval castle still stand. Near the fortification, they discovered the remains of a 2,000-year-old settlement. The Sertorian Wars took place in this place, and last year, at the site of destruction, archaeologists discovered a unique bronze plate in the shape of a hand, and the dimensions of the plate were similar to the palm of a person, 14.5 centimeters. After conducting a study in the laboratory, scientists examined strange inscriptions divided into 4 lines. There were 40 symbols in total. When the bronze plate was first discovered, it was mistaken for part of the helmet. At first, neither ornaments nor symbols were visible. After a detailed analysis, the scientists found out the composition of the plate. It is 53% tin, 41% copper, and 2% lead, what was considered the norm for those times. A small notch was drilled in the metal hand for hanging on the front door of the house as a talisman. The first word was Sorioneku, which is easily translated into the modern Basque word Zorioneko, meaning good luck or good omen. The rest of the inscription has not yet been deciphered. This seemingly primitive artifact can actually be attributed to an important archaeological and linguistic discovery. Scientists are sure that people spoke the Bak language more than 2,000 years ago. If this find did not surprise you, then the next one will definitely amaze you. Drugs during the sacrifice. South America's interest in the ancient world is not inferior even to Egypt. The ancient peoples living here did truly terrifying things. This time, scientists from the USA, Peru, and Poland have found a terrible proof. After conducting a lot of research to accurately verify their guesses, they determined that the ancient Incas, before the sacrifices, drugged children. In this way, they calmed them before the ritual, which was watched by hundreds and thousands of people. And most likely, the parents of their children watched this. Archaeologists discovered the remains of 2 children in the area of the Amparo volcano in Peru, and based on their hair and nails, scientists found a small amount of cocaine and the ayahuasca hallucinogen, which is very developed in this region today. At the same time, they are sure that 500 years ago, the Incas used ayahuasca not as a hallucinogen, but to calm children. Scientists believe that the children were well aware of what awaited them in the near future, and voluntarily they would not have agreed to the sacrifices. To do this, the shamans gave them drugs for several weeks, constantly increasing the dosage. This is confirmed by the Spanish colonialists who witnessed this terrible ritual. They wrote that they saw how people were brought to the sacrificial ceremony and they behaved completely calmly, as if they had been preparing for this all their lives. The capacocha ritual was a common practice among the ancient Incas. It was only held on special occasions. A victory in battle or the birth of a royal son was considered a special occasion. What now seems like something incredible, literally 500 to 600 years ago, was considered common. To relieve some tension, I will tell you about one of the oldest trading settlements in Oman. Traces of cannibalism in Britain. Archaeologists have discovered the remains of 37 Bronze Age people with traces of cannibalism in England. The burial was found in a 15-meter deep shaft in Charterhouse, Warren. Analysis of more than 3,000 bones, which belonged to men, women, and children of different ages, showed that they all died violently. The bones show traces of blows from blunt objects, cuts from dismemberment, and even teeth marks on the hands and feet. Scientists suggest that cannibalism was ritualistic and could have been a way of humiliating the defeated. The remains of cattle were also found in the burial, which, according to the researchers, symbolizes the mixing of human and animal remains to completely dehumanize the victims. This discovery destroys the idea of the peaceful nature of the early Bronze Age and demonstrates that mass violence, dismemberment, and dehumanization of enemies were part of human history in Britain thousands of years ago. Ancient buildings from pre-Columbian times. The ancient secrets of the Amazon continue to unfold before us despite their centuries-old mysteries. Modern technological methods are beginning to reveal the extent of the ancient civilizations that once existed in this place. Using modern LiDAR technology, which uses light to measure distance, researchers Vinicius Peripato and Luis Aragao, in collaboration with photographer Diego Gurgel, made a startling discovery. They were able to discover over 20 earthworks created by ancient indigenous people, which until then had gone unnoticed. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Scientists suggest that there may be another 10,000 to 24,000 similar structures hidden in the depths of the forest. According to research from Brazil's National Institute of Space Research, indigenous people have inhabited the Amazon basin for more than 12,000 years. However, the full extent of their presence and interaction with nature has not yet been studied. Diego Gurgel, who took aerial photographs, helped reveal stunning geoglyphs, huge geometric shapes buried in the forest. Unique round burials. In December 2023, archaeologists from the Museum of Cultural History discovered a unique burial of infants in a quarry near Fredrikstad, Norway. Most of the 41 graves contain cremated remains of infants, a rarity for the period 800–200 BC. Scientists determined the age of those buried by thin fragments of cranial bones characteristic of infants. Each grave was surrounded by stone circles, and the remains were placed in urns or directly under the stones. Interestingly, cooking pits and fire pits were found near the graves, indicating rituals and gatherings associated with burials. The site may have been a meeting place for an ancient community where people mourned the loss of children. Mass graves of children are rare in archaeology. This discovery provides insight into the attitudes of ancient communities towards children, showing that they were an important part of society. And even thousands of years ago, people had great difficulty coping with the loss of their children. Ancient trading settlement. On the western coast of the Arabian Peninsula in Dava, there is a complex of 5 early Bronze Age sites. Archaeologists have been excavating here for 10 years. And during this time, they managed to discover a lot of valuable and interesting finds. Some of them confirmed that an ancient trading settlement was located on this site, and according to a number of analyses, it is the oldest in the world. Archaeological finds include building floor plans, industrial infrastructure, and silver jewelry that tell new stories of ancient trade. The settlement dates back to Nar, which flourished from about 2600 to 2000 BC. Archaeologists have excavated Dawa's stone buildings, including warehouses, industrial copper processing centers, administrative offices, and religious houses. All structures are the first of their kind since prehistoric times, found in Oman. Researchers found a mass grave nearby. Many local and imported pottery and soapstone were found with the remains. For the production of jewelry, silver was delivered from the territory of modern Turkey. This proves that people in the Bronze Age were very smart and technologically advanced. More than 4,000 years ago, there were settlements on our planet that were in no way inferior to modern states. Even then, people were thinking hundreds of years ahead, erecting structures and building supply chains. And a little closer to our time in ancient Egypt, people were stigmatized. How people were stigmatized. Now you will not see anyone with a tattoo on the body, and many tattoos look like a real work of art, although the attitude towards them is completely different for everyone. Even animals today are stigmatized, which indicates their belonging. But in ancient Egypt, tattoos were done to people not at all for the sake of beauty. For a long time, humane researchers wanted to believe that in ancient times only cattle were branded. Historians refused to believe that people were stigmatized to indicate their belonging to a particular slave owner. It sounds too animalistic. That's just an exhibit in the British Museum indicates that in ancient Egypt, people were still branded without their consent. The ancient stamps located in the museum are too small for cattle, and there is no point in branding small animals. And as history shows, people were perfect for this. In ancient texts, there were references to the branding of slaves and prisoners of war in Egypt. For example, on the carving of Medinet Habu, dating back to 1185 BC, found in Luxor, scientists examined red-hot small seals. They were carried in a portable heater. The citizens of Egypt should not have worried. Usually nothing threatened them. But foreign slaves and soldiers in a mandatory manner received a stigma with a red-hot seal. The slaveholding practice in ancient Egypt was similar to serfdom, when the land was sold together with the peasants. Land that consistently yields a crop was sold along with the people who cultivated it, and people lived with this shameful stigma all their lives. Human skull from Petralona cave. The unique discovery of a human skull made in the middle of the last century has already been forgotten by many, but its discovery can significantly shake the history of the origin of man. Or maybe this is again the same find that historians are trying to turn a blind eye to so as not to rewrite our history. An interesting incident occurred in 1959 in Greece, where a group of enthusiasts discovered a cave near the village of Petralona. In addition to ancient stalactites, many interesting finds were found in the cave, confirming the presence of a person here. These are the remains of ancient wood, the wool of extinct animals and tools. But this one find looked pretty creepy and was non-standard. The most important find in the cave was a skull embedded in the rock. Such a find should have been made public. However, Aris Poulianos intervened in this story. At one time, he dealt with the topic, the origin of the Greeks. For many, his writings have been controversial, and historians have dismissed his evidence. As soon as the doctor found out about the Petralonian man, as the skull embedded in the rock was called, he immediately went to study it. After analyzing the object, it was possible to prove that this individual really developed separately in Europe, and his relatives did not come from Africa. Many scientists immediately challenged the opinion of Aris Poulianos, stating that the skull is about 60,000 and not 750,000 years old, as the doctor claims. However, there is one thing. Scientists conducted a stratigraphic analysis of the cave and deposits, as well as 2 more skeletons found later, and we are talking about a figure of about 700,000 years. Researchers who have been working on studying the skull have confirmed that it is different from Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, and this contradicts the African theory of the origin of man. There was a large hole in the vault of the Petralona cave where various animals fell over the years. A huge mountain of bones and signs of 20 cultural layers were found at this place. In 2012, the doctor was attacked and beaten. He was threatened with death if he continued to speak publicly about his research. And if all this is true, then there is an opinion that we all did not come from one species. Perhaps we differ in skin color and eye shape not because of evolution, but because of our origin. I better not say too much on this topic and rather tell you about the next find. City of the era of the legendary king Hammurabi. At Tel Mohammed in Iraq, an international team of archaeologists has discovered the remains of an ancient fortress. These ruins date back to the era of Hammurabi, the famous Babylonian ruler who became famous for his code of laws. New finds indicate that the city was abandoned after the fall of Babylon to the Hittite king Mursilius I in 1595 BC. This conclusion is supported by historical texts found at the excavation site. The researchers focused on studying the northeastern part of the city, where, following descriptions of ancient texts, they discovered the remains of a fortress wall, a canal, and a potential port near the Tigris River. Scientists believe the canal may have been part of a complex sewer system created using terracotta pipes to quickly drain wastewater. Archaeologists also discovered a staircase to the high terrace on which the tower stood, and a nearby cistern, which originally served to collect water but was later converted into a drainage. Within the city walls, structures related to grain processing and bread preparation were found. Of particular interest are the furnaces used to liquefy the bitumen and the sacred bathroom with altar. Nearby were tombs associated with ancestor worship, referred to in ancient texts as kispum. Other finds include cylinder seals for administrative purposes, decorated with images of the era, and votive terracotta items from the 2nd millennium BC. 5,000-year-old Dwarven village. The village of Mucunic, located on the border with Afghanistan, is unique for its small houses built thousands of years ago. The height of these houses does not exceed 1.5 meters, and modern Iranians can barely enter them without bending over. Inside these houses, local residents stood tall, as their height did not exceed 1.5 meters. The small stature of the inhabitants was due to a lack of food and vitamins, which slowed down the growth of bones. Also, marriages between close relatives due to isolation and lack of funds for travel contributed to this. Life in the village was difficult. The soil was poor, and the inhabitants grew only low-maintenance crops such as turnips and barley. The situation has changed with the development of infrastructure in Iran. The construction of roads made it possible to deliver a variety of food products to the village, including meat and grains. This resulted in each generation becoming 10 centimeters taller. Modern residents of Mucunic are tall and healthy people thanks to subsidies and government support. Today, 700 people live in Mucunica next to the small houses of their ancestors. They continue to farm, but now their bodies are strong and tall. The village's history illustrates how harsh conditions and poor soil made the inhabitants Lilliputians, and the development of infrastructure and government support restored them to normal growth and health. Message from aliens. Easter Island, lost in the South Pacific Ocean, became famous for its giant stone statues, moai, and mysterious tablets with Rongorongo writing. These ancient tablets, covered with strange hieroglyphs, still remain one of the greatest archaeological mysteries. Scientists believe that Rongorongo is the writing of the Rapa Nui civilization, which flourished on the island until the 18th century. The story of their discovery begins in 1864 when the French missionary Eugene Ayraud first noticed wooden tablets covered with unusual signs. The tablets were made of Toromira wood, which grows on the island, and were found in almost every home. However, most of these artifacts soon disappeared due to internecine wars and destruction. About 25 tablets have survived, and their study revealed a unique writing style reminiscent of inverted boustrophedon. This method of writing signs was previously found only among the Incas. The tablets depict figures of animals, plants, and anthropomorphic creatures. Scientists assume that these symbols could have been used to record rituals and myths. Of particular interest are the similarities between Rongorongo and other ancient scripts. Some signs resemble the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt, India, as well as the symbols of the Harappan civilization that flourished in the Indus Valley. Parallels were even drawn with the writings of the Kuna Indians from Central America and the drawings on the island of Sumatra. This gives rise to theories about possible connections between ancient cultures across the ocean. Attempts to decipher Rongorongo are still ongoing, but it has not yet been possible to fully understand these writings. One version is the description of rituals with sacrifices to the gods. Another hypothesis, more fantastic, suggests an extraterrestrial origin of these signs, hinting at contact with alien civilizations. Otherwise, how could people living on different continents have similar writing in those distant times? And in our time, having a huge amount of communication with each other through phones, satellites, and the internet, we speak different languages. The mystery of Rongorongo remains unsolved, but its study continues to inspire scientists and enthusiasts around the world. Viking silver stash. Just north of Stockholm, archaeologists have discovered a once-in-a-lifetime find. In the municipality of Täby, in one of the houses located in the site of an ancient Viking settlement, researchers dug up a ceramic pot with ancient decorations and silver coins. Inside were 8 neck rings, 2 wrist rings, a finger ring, a pair of pearls, and 12 pendants in the form of coins in a linen bag. Most of all, scientists were interested in the neck rings of the Vikings, which were worn by both women and men. They were about 1,000 years old, but the preservation shocked archaeologists. They looked almost like new, despite the fact that they had been underground for 1,000 years. This find is part of a larger find at the site. More than 20 houses and buildings, arrows and rings for amulets were identified here. However, these finds fade against the background of a pot with silver ornaments. Silver treasures are very important. They speak of the wealth of their owner, ancient jewelers, their religion and culture. In addition to ornaments, Arab and Norman coins were found in the pot. Everything is clear with silver jewelry. It is not clear why the Vikings stole Anglo-Saxon books. Did they really love to read so much? Books of Anglo-Saxon England. We have often heard about the Dark Ages, but Anglo-Saxon England was not the same as we are told. Their books are considered valuable assets. The first printed books would appear only after a couple of centuries, and therefore the production of each new book required a huge effort. A team of craftsmen and scribes worked on each book. The production of a new book required a huge amount of labor and time. Therefore, the literature of the Dark Ages has become a symbol of power and wealth. Anglo-Saxon books were highly valued by the Viking invaders. You can read it in the famous Codex Aureus, one of the most sumptuous surviving gospel books from the Anglo-Saxon era. The surviving text of the code mentions that a noble Saxon family bought it from the great pagan army in the middle of the 9th century. Some of the pages in the book are purple. In Anglo-Saxon times, making purple dye required a painstaking process that involved obtaining ink from sea slugs. It is also highly likely that the manuscript originally had a gold jeweled cover. Thus, you begin to understand the painstaking effort that went into making the book, why it is so attractive to the Vikings, and why the Saxon nobility supposedly paid a huge sum to buy it. Since books became a symbol of wealth and power, the rulers of those times carried books with them, even to wars. And later, books began to be given and used as an exchange for other books or jewelry. The book was an ideal gift during diplomatic acts. The only pity is that although books were valued in those days, it was not because of the meaning that it carried, but because of the difficulty of production and high cost. The ship that was able to surprise. Sometimes the forces of nature seem to laugh at us, throwing us new finds that ask a lot of questions. It's good when archaeologists find something and it immediately explains this or that moment in our history. It's good when they find the remains of ancient animals that were missing in the evolutionary chain. But it's much worse when you manage to find something that defies any logic, and when scientists determine the age of an object, it breaks the whole history. A similar story happened after the melting of the glaciers. A couple of years ago in Naryan-Mar, Russia, melting glaciers exposed an unusual soil consisting of humus and black soil. The researchers said that in this place there was a riverbed. A ship was found in the middle of this fertile layer. This was a boat or a small ship about 10 meters long. The wooden parts of the ship were connected with metal nails, and it seems to be nothing out of the ordinary. But this river was navigable about 20,000 years ago, and after the permafrost covered this area, and only now the ice has melted. The preliminary age of the nails is 6,000 years, but how then did the ship end up here 20,000 years ago, where it was built, how it was brought here, to whom it belonged? Why, apart from the ship, nothing else was found nearby? I told you there would be more questions than answers. If you believe the alternative history, then at the time of the Cro-Magnons there already existed a civilization that could quite easily produce metal products. According to the legends of some northern peoples, a semi-mythical people of metallurgists once lived here who knew how to build furnaces, melt various metals, and combine them with each other. It sounds like a fairy tale, but we know that every lie in fiction hides at least a little truth. While we are waiting for new archaeological finds that will help us explain the origin of the old ones, I will tell you a story about a unique person. Babylon's vision of Earth and beyond. The Babylonian world map, or Imago Mundi, is one of the oldest known maps, dating back to around the 8th century BC. The clay tablet depicts the ancient Babylonians' view of the Earth. The center of the map depicts Babylon, located on the Euphrates River. The map is surrounded by important geographic features: Susa to the south, Urartu to the northeast, and Haban to the northwest. Beyond this area are triangular regions that researchers believe represent unknown lands or mountainous regions. The map is surrounded by a salt river called the Bitter River, which they believe ran across the entire planet. Mythical inscriptions mentioning the creation of land and sea by the god Marduk are also noteworthy, making the map not only a geographic, but also a cosmological artifact. The UFO connection comes from the triangular regions beyond the map. Some researchers believe that the ancient inhabitants of Babylon tried to depict unknown lands, which they associated with divine or extraterrestrial beings. The oldest shipyard in the world. On the island of Dana, off the coast of the Turkish province of Mersin, the ruins of an ancient giant shipyard were discovered. With large amounts of iron ore and cedar, the island in the Cilician region has been a key center of trade and politics since the Bronze Age. 296 boathouses from different eras were found on the territory, which indicates the possibility of simultaneous construction of up to 300 warships. Ships were also maintained and repaired here. Most of the boathouses are carved out of rock and are classified according to their unique features. Some of them are only partially preserved due to destruction, and behind them structures, possibly for service boats, have been discovered. Some of the boathouses collapsed into the sea due to earthquakes. Tried to treat cancer. A study of 2 ancient skulls yielded surprising results. They showed signs of cancer and traces of attempts to treat it. These findings show that the ancient Egyptians knew about cancer and tried to fight it. Signs of this disease included severe tissue destruction and small metastases. Particularly interesting are the cut marks around the lesions, suggesting that the Egyptians may have attempted to remove the tumors surgically. The ancient Egyptians were famous for their medical knowledge. They knew how to treat fractures, treat injuries, make prosthetics, and even fill teeth. However, their ability to treat cancer was limited. Scientists studied 2 skulls from the Duckworth collection at the University of Cambridge. One skull belonged to a 35-year-old man with signs of cancer and surgical interventions. The other skull belonged to a woman over 50 years old with cancerous lesions and signs of healed injuries. The researchers stressed that studying ancient remains is fraught with difficulties, with incomplete skeletons and a lack of clinical history making conclusions difficult. However, these findings provide new insights into ancient medical practices and highlight the need for further research in paleontology. A person who weighed less than 20 kilograms. Freak shows were very popular in the 19th century. The most unusual and sometimes even strange people were taken there. Unfortunately, almost everyone got there out of desperation. Usually it is difficult for such people to find a job, make friends, and even more so a family. And the money in such shows paid good. But the hero of our video did not even think about going there to work, if not for a terrible illness. Isaac Sprag, after a severe illness, became practically a walking skeleton. With a height of 186 centimeters, he weighed less than 20 kilograms. However, in order to support his family, he performed in freak shows at fairs. The famous entrepreneur P.T. Barnum gathered a unique troupe of those times. He had a human dog, Siamese twins, and the living skeleton of Isaac Sprag. The guy was born in a normal, healthy family, and until the age of 12, nothing foreshadowed trouble. He had an excellent appetite and good nutrition, but at some point he began to lose weight catastrophically. He continued to help his father at work, only his strength became less and less. Doctors could not explain the reason for the sharp weight loss. At the end of adolescence, he lost his parents. He could not work physically. For this, he had to look for non-standard part-time jobs. Once at the fair, Taylor Barnum accidentally noticed him and offered him a job. He was making $80 a week, which is about $1,400 in modern times. After 3 years working for Barnum, he decided to take a break from his career, and during this time he met his future wife. Tamara Moore bore him 3 children who grew up to normal size and had no health problems. The family had to be fed, and Sprag had to return to the freak show again. He hated his job, his health was deteriorating, and for a while he carried a flask of milk with him to replenish his energy. From complete impotence, he fell asleep on the go. At some point, he was diagnosed with aggressive muscular atrophy, a disease due to which muscle tissue was depleted. When he realized that he did not have long to live, he signed a contract with one university that after death his body would be opened and studied. After that, his body can be viewed in a museum. For the so-called service, he was to be given $1,000. However, it is not known for sure whether he managed to carry out this deal and how he left for the next world. At the end of the video, by tradition, I want to ask you for a big fat thumb up and write a kind comment. Thanks for your views. Bye, everyone.